Did you read nonviolence?
I read the civil disobedience and nonviolence.
Yeah, good. I mean nonviolence.
Yeah, yeah, I read that one twice, so the only thing I can think of is nonviolence. I was just confused a little bit, like how nonviolent, I don't know, some of the things she said I didn't agree with, and some of the things I did agree with, like the violence power.
Okay, so the definitions in nonviolence.
Well, yeah, like, I don't know, there's one part where she says that, had Gandhi been fighting a different enemy, things would have turned out different. And I just don't agree with that, because the thing, and what she's saying is all theoretical, and I don't think necessarily hers has been tried, but I really don't agree with that. She was saying that violence can destroy power, but it cannot create it. And I do agree with that, but I don't necessarily agree that it can destroy power. I think like in a physical form it can destroy power, but if power is what she's saying is like a group of people getting together and it's the actual action, even if you like murder that group of people, if they had spread their action elsewhere before that, I don't think you really destroyed power. You know, you destroyed the physical embodiment of that, but.
I think if you manage to kill everyone who had that political or particular belief set, that would pretty much expunge that kind of power that they had.
And I agree with that, and I think a lot of why she says that is because of the Holocaust, and that was the idea there, is to actually kill an entire group of people with a certain religious belief. But, like, for instance, Judaism, you could construe that as political action. It's a group of people that got together and did things, and, you know, some things maybe not, but, and even if Hitler had killed every Jewish person in Europe, that wouldn't have killed the power of Judaism, I don't think, because that idea is still out there.
Would that idea actually be out there though if it was killed off? Because they talk about a lot of the traditions being done
well,
with.
Like for Judaism, I was like, there's like sacred texts and things like that. So I guess in like a ideal situation for Hitler, if you burned all of the texts, if you killed every person that thought that, if you did all of those things, maybe you could, but eventually I feel like it would come up again anyway, because it's an idea. It's like, kind of like numbers.
I may agree with like established groups like Judaism, but for example, if if in Rwanda the Hutus have killed all the Tutsis, and we don't, I know very little about Tutsi culture.
Mm-hmm.
They would have been done,
And I agree with that, but don't you think it would have branched out eventually into two other groups? And that same power struggle would have, and that's the thing, is like the general idea, I don't think you can like destroy
The idea is that the only way you can get rid of that idea is by killing off all the people. I mean, that's kind of speaking to the like, so if Hitler had killed off all the Jews, it's kind of speaking to Hitler's platform, and what he's trying to push is like, how strong is that idea if the only way you're really going to spread it and push it onto people is, or get to kill everybody? Yeah, it just seems like it doesn't. It's not a very sound plan if that's what you need. And another group's going to come around. Like you're saying, it may not be Judaism, but it might be very similar. Yeah, and it might be like, well then, violence sort of leads to more violence because then you're forced to kill off those people because your ideas are still not solid.
And that was kind of the thing is I'm not sure if I agree that violence can destroy power like that. I think it has a possibility to.
I don't think she does either, though. It sounds to me like what you're saying is what Arendt would agree with.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing, but then I was confused because I wasn't quite sure how it all, like, came back in a loop. So she would agree with nonviolence completely, but she's still saying that, like, if you really do want to destroy power and use violence. I don't know if that's just kind of what I got from it.
Let's look at it. Keep going.
Do you want me to find where it says that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about 140.
I think it's 152. Oh no, that's something different. Yeah, it might need to be in the 40s.
Look at 141 maybe, but I'm not sure where the reference to Gandhi is. Anybody else?
The reference to Gandhi is on page 152. That was just kind of like a side note thing, and then I went on.
Okay.
Well, I guess, I mean, it's kind of a side note, but at the same time, what are you saying that if they had been a different opposition, it may not have been successful. So is
Yeah.
that saying that she doesn't
Well,
agree
that's the
with
thing.
nonviolence?
I guess
or
that's
something?
what it came back to me is like, that is like the ultimate thing of nonviolence, it's the ultimate display of nonviolence. But then she's still saying, and I think it does have to do with her upbringing and her life, but then she's still saying that if it had been a different, if it had been a different enemy, it would turn out differently, and I don't understand that, because I don't
But
agree.
here, all right, look at this. Let's compare 141 and 152. The extreme form of power is all against one. The extreme form of violence is one against all. And this latter is never possible without instruments, that is weapons. And, you know, and that was, we had the discussion of, you know, what if a gunman came in here and what? Come on, come on, you can't sit there and laugh about something and not tell us what you're laughing at. No?
Yeah,
You can't?
I'm reserving the right this time.
Okay. It's show-stopping at a certain point, though. Because there's something that's funny. What's funny?
I was just kind of imagining just again walking in here
Right.
and reaction. So pretty horrible, but also funny.
So
In
that's
a
horrible
weird way.
things.
But yeah.
Okay, all right, look.
Mathematical.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be, somebody would get, there would be a lot of blood.
And being filmed.
And on film, right? Okay.
Yeah, it
so-
would be filmed. Yeah, that got.
That's gotta be the first target then. Shoot the camera.
All right, look,
Moving on.
I mean, and I don't know if this is even helpful in understanding anything that we need, you know, she's trying to talk about some essence of political power, you know, and ground it in something, and she's, you know, grounds things in history and says we've forgotten about it, that we've forgotten about, you know, I didn't have you read it, but on the beginning, you know, the idea that war is an extension of politics. And she said war is the breakdown of politics, it's not an extension of politics. That power in a form that has emerged in the 20th century, the mid-20th century, nuclear power, the power to destroy the world, is mass suicide, it's not power. So, you know, what she's doing is saying, look, what are these, once again, I mean, it's the same move she makes in every move she writes, which is we use these words, are we understanding what we're saying when we use them? So is, you know, is power comes out of the barrel of a gun, right? Is that something we say?
I've never said it, but.
Me neither.
I've
All right,
never
never
heard
mind,
it
we
said.
haven't said, you know,
Sounds like the same.
Yeah.
it sounds like the lore of the West, you know, but
She's got the bigger gun.
who's got the bigger gun?
It's not true at all.
I mean, what she's trying to say is that power is not violence, and that we tend to think of power as violence. But to her, the essence of politics, and hence the essence of power, or political power, and she's careful in nonviolence to distinguish power from things like strength, which she says is an individual attribute. There can be a strong man or a strong woman, but that's different from the type of power she wants us to understand, which is collective. It's the power that comes out of a group deciding on a course of action.
Well, so I'm just really, I don't know, for some reason I really read it the wrong way, because on page 141 she says, what actually happens in such cases, and she's talking about somebody interrupting in classes, the majority clearly refuses to use its power and overpower the disruptor. The academic process breaks down because no one is willing to raise more than a voting finger. And then on page 152,
Yeah.
so I understand, so it's like you need to do more than just, you know, sit in your chair submissively, you know. And then on 152, she says, in a head-on clash between violence and power, the outcome is hardly in doubt. If Gandhi's enormously powerful and successful strategy of nonviolent resistance had met with a different enemy, Stalin's Russia, Hitler's Germany, even pre-war Japan, the outcome would not have been decolonization but massacre and submission. And that just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like she's being contradictory because I feel like Gandhi did raise more than a voting finger. But then she's saying it doesn't matter because it was England who he was up against. And they didn't choose violence where somebody else would have, so they still would have lost.
So it doesn't matter. No.
Yeah, so it just, I don't understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are certain conditions in which, violent, even Gandhi's methods would have been really, really hard for it to work, though. I mean,
I think Hitler probably just killed him.
I think I agree. I think his England, the type of culture and the type of relationship that is already established, the reason his method worked was the type of enemy he was up against. If he was going up against, like you said, Stalin, Hitler, Germany was such a different mindset and such a, like she was talking about how violence is one against all. They had that mindset. They said, okay, I have all these things and I will use them. England didn't really work like that. They were kind of past the point where they had massacred everything all the time.
But to me,
So I don't think she's talking about the outcome as in he would have won or lost. I think she's talking about the outcome as in had violence or not, like the methodology
my point
he
is
would
not
have used.
necessarily this exact example. It's that as a theory, I don't see how that holds with this contradictory thing. Because if it should, then that wouldn't be the case for this example.
It might also be partly like how she interprets Gandhi and his relationship with the times, I guess, because I imagine, I mean, even if it had been someone else, Gandhi probably would have done different things, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that he
Okay.
would
That
have.
he knew his enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that was his big thing, is he researched his enemy. And, so it may have been different, but I just think I guess I'm not understanding where nonviolence is successful and where it's not in her theory.
Let's try to move this, because I think what you're seeing as a contradiction may not be completely contradictory. I mean, let's say that what I think the main thing she's trying to demonstrate in this essay, which is very political and was written in the very late 1960s or 1971 or 2 or something. It was when the anti-war movement, the student movement, the civil rights movement in the United States had gotten very violent. And students or protesters, civil disobedience, were fond of quoting people that she refers to at the beginning of this essay, John Bostock and brain freeze here. Theorists that seem to glorify violence. Black Panthers were arguing that you couldn't use, it was Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King, that violence was no longer working. I'm just, sorry, I can't, it'll come to me. One of the theorists, along with Sartre, who was saying that there was no choice left except to turn to violence. That Martin Luther King, who modeled himself on Gandhi, was not going to be successful in the face of violent racists who were, or police brutality. It was, there was this violent engagement in the 1960s, towards the end of the 1960s. And she regretted that. She was trying to argue that we don't need to turn to violence, that in fact violence won't help a good cause. And so I think when we're looking at, what she's trying to do is to say, what is violence in fact compatible with power, pure political power, which she also associated with freedom. The ability to act, to think, to not become part of a totalitarian movement. So if you look at 152, I think what she's saying, although I also read this again, Paige, it just, like a couple of hours ago, and I went, actually thought, Paige isn't gonna like this. It's because it feels too pedantic and theoretical now. It's like my sense of all of you is a kind of a impatience, which I totally honor. I mean, basically, I said, okay, I got all this theory, let's talk about action, and you said, let's act. And to me, that's wonderfully hopeful. Basically, it got me to say, okay, but let's act in an informed way. Let's not just, let's figure out what defines and gives meaning, where our action fits historically. And are there theorists that can help us to understand the context in which we're acting? So on the one hand, I read this and I just anticipated this entire class's impatience with it. And I was thinking, maybe Hannah Arendt is no longer appropriate or is not appropriate for this particular historical moment where we're faced. But I just had another thought which might save her. So I think that what she's saying on 152, and I raised this with some hesitancy because I'm not sure, is that she's saying, look, in the short run, the guy with the gun is going to win. Okay, I mean, if you get blown away by people with guns, you lose. I'm thinking the people in the trade towers didn't have a chance against Al-Qaeda flying jet planes into the building. So, in that sense, they lost. Is this a statement of faith that ultimately, like you say, you can't destroy? If you completely destroy your enemies with violence, what have you won? And what is the side that is capable of slaughtering and eliminating an enemy in the name of anything, whether it's, Allah is great, or Jesus is Lord, or Jews are vermin, or black people are inferior, or gays are evil. If the side that thinks that, and let's just allow that there certainly are people in the world who think those kinds of things, the side that thinks that is prepared to use unilateral violence to try to rid the world of their enemy, what can that side consist of? And with Arendt, I think what she's saying is not the makings of freedom or political power. That they would have to maintain their stand with armed vigilance at all times. And the thing about violence is that somebody sooner or later comes around with, yes, a bigger gun.
Actually, that makes more sense, because at the bottom of the page she says, to substitute violence for power can bring victory, but the price is very high, for it can only be paid by the vanquished. It is also paid by the victor in terms of his own power, which would be the reason why he was using the violence, to gain power over another man, country, which then he would have lost. So it kind of like negates the use of violence a little bit.
And I think that's what, that's her complaint about totalitarianism, is that it destroys and engulfs. But if you destroy, then there's nothing left. What you have is nothing except looking out for somebody else coming along and destroying you. And so I think that this is a real. I'm going to suggest a way of talking about it that might shed some light on it. But I think that this is like her hope for freedom. That there is such a thing as raw political power. And it's the opposite of violence because it involves the ability to talk and act in concert. It's her phrase from the human condition. That, it's a reasoned path that says, let's try this together, rather than, you're wrong, I win, I got it done. I'm actually thinking of, remember the movie Crash? That, in the beginning, where the two protagonists, and I don't even remember their names, the two black guys. Remember that opening scene? They're in Westwood, they're in UCLA's fancy little suburb.
I think, I can't remember exactly the different characters, 'cause I remember like the top lines a little bit.
Yeah, but they're walking, right, and they're in a fancy white studenty part of Los Angeles. And they're talking about the fact one of them feels that a waitress has not been respectful of him, and didn't serve him coffee. And he says, what does she think? Does she think that black people don't tip as well as white people, or the waitress was a black woman? And the other guy said, well, what'd you tip her? And he said, well, nothing. I don't tip for that kind of service. You know, I mean, it was almost Shakespearean banter between the two of them. It was comical. And then he said, now look at us. We look perfectly respectable. We're walking down the street. We look like we could be UCLA students, right? You know, and look at all these white people are afraid of us. Why are they afraid of us? You know, and